everybody, welcome back to another edition of PD and P-Dubs Unscripted here. Good to see you, P-Dubs.
Hey, great to be back with you, PD, and everybody else. Happy day to you.
Happy, today's July 18th when we're recording, and you're going to be hearing this on July 19th.
All right, nothing like, a fresh podcast.
Fresh podcast. Hopefully those that watched the video appreciate the video last week and back at trying our hand again at the video podcasting.
Yeah. Hopefully it can be something that we can roll out all the time and it's appreciated by people. That'd be all right.
Just another avenue of whether you want to watch on video or just listen to us. I don't know. I go back and forth on some of the podcasts I listen to.
Right.
But yeah, so it's good to be back here in the studio recording. And who's this episode brought to us by?
This episode is brought to us by the Backpacks Blessing and Barbecue.
Right, our annual trip to the bandshell here in downtown Palatine, where we have an awesome service outside, weather permitting.
Yep.
We have some great music from our praise team, and then we also have some fun where we get to have a little message and then the barbecue at the end.
Yeah, we wrap up our worship with certainly blessing of all the students' backpacks, blessing our teachers for the coming year, and then our elders are out grilling, and boy, there's going to be a lot of good food out there.
Right, they are some great grill masters, our elders, and they're out there. Sometimes we have the huge grill from Ace Hardware, and then we have the one that we got donated to us. That's really nice one, that big one with the propane.
Yeah, for sure.
And the elders just go to town grilling some hot dogs and burgers. And
yes, indeed, and a lot of good sides, and we got a good team of people who are getting all the food preps done, and hopefully it'll be a great time. So it usually is, and nice, relaxing atmosphere. Great day to be outside and getting together.
Right, and, like I was saying, we have a message, some great music, and then we have some games afterwards if people want to stick around and play some games, enjoy the weather outside at the park. And this is on Sunday, August 13th at 10:30 a.m., so at our normal 10:30 worship time for those that are familiar. But this is a great opportunity to invite people to come and join us for a time of worship. That it's a maybe threatening, because it's maybe since it's off-site, maybe not as bad for people like, if they've had a bad experience with the church where they don't feel comfortable coming into a church. It's meant to be that opportunity to bring somebody to come and just hear and have a good time.
Right. And the official location is, I always got to look up the name, the Fred P. Hall Amphitheater. We call it the Bandshell, right off of Community Park in Palatine.
Well, what's with the community not calling it the Bandshell like we call it?
I know, it's just so easy. But the Fred P. Hall, I actually met Fred P. Hall, and he worked with my brother, so he's a good guy.
Okay.
And it's good that he has an amphitheater named after him. I don't know if he was a musical guy or whatever, but
I don't know.
It's
never
honor.
met Fred.
Yeah, Fred's a good guy. And so, the amphitheater is kind of near the Palatine Community Pool and in Community Park. And so, come on out and join us.
Right, and then I think I forgot that then towards the end of that service, we bring everybody together, like our teachers, and we give a blessing to our teachers, and then students with their backpacks. And so that's a wonderful time. And then one thing we're doing a little bit different this year is in the past years, we've been collecting backpacks to give to Virginia Lake School.
Right.
And as you said in the announcements this weekend, Virginia Lake's we got enough backpacks. We don't need any more right now. So instead of collecting backpacks, we're just collecting different school supplies that we can donate then to Virginia Lake School.
Yeah, I remember dropping off the backpacks last year, and they're like, oh, boy, we sure got still some left over from previous years. So message received, and, at least the kids will get school supplies, which is really important.
Right, so we're still giving back and helping this community out. So it's not just a time for worship, but it's also a time to give back and help those in our community that could use some extra help.
Yeah, and it's for anybody to come and enjoy with us. You don't have to be a member of Emmanuel or connected. We'd love to get to know you and enjoy a Sunday morning, afternoon with you.
Right, and did we talk about the price and how expensive this is for the people coming to worship?
We didn't.
Join us?
It's a whopping $0. It's free.
Are you sure? $0?
Yeah, it's all free. So, I think there's always a free will offering if people feel compelled, but that's not an obligation.
Right, it's not necessary. So this is all for free. It's just a way to be out in the community and be visible and share the love of the Lord with everybody.
Yeah. So a way to kind of wrap up summer and, get ready for the new school year, which for our school starts a few days after that on August 16th.
Wow, that's hard to believe. We're less than a month away from school starting. It doesn't feel like it ended that long ago.
No, it didn't. No.
So we just want to kind of share that with everybody, all of our audience. And if you're in the Palatine area, come and join us on Sunday, August 13th at 10:30. Get there a little sooner because, if it's sunny outside, people like sitting along the tree line so they get some shade.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you want to get some shade, if it's sunny, you want to be there early.
Yeah, you want to get your optimal spot.
Right. And so that's an awesome thing we have coming up in the next month. But today we want to kind of look back a little bit at this past weekend's sermon topic and the verses there from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 13. And also maybe look a little ahead to your text that you're preaching upon this upcoming weekend on July 23rd, I believe.
Yeah, 23rd and 24th. Yeah. It is Matthew chapter 13. It's a well-known parable, the parable of the sower. And in that story, the man, spreads his seed, and it falls on different levels or types of soil or ground. And Jesus kind of talks about, how the seed takes root or springs up or doesn't take root in any of those locations. So, and then equates it to our faith. And it's one of those we're thankful that he explained it, because there's a lot of parables he doesn't explain for us, and we're left guessing.
Right, and there's some subtle clues, like I kind of mentioned in the first one, that when it fell along the path and the birds snatching it up. I was listening to Chad Bird talk about that text and saying how in the Old Testament and like Jewish culture, that was the bird was kind of represented Satan, which I never knew that. I don't know about you.
I never I guess I never really connected it in that way, but it does make sense that Satan wants to snatch and rob us of our joy, of our faith, and so it makes sense.
So I thought that was kind of neat, and so like especially when you put it in context of like the hearer of that day, like when Jesus was sharing that message with the people, they would have understood like right away maybe, or had a little bit better context of like, oh, I can see that connecting point of bird representing Satan, because that's how we kind of know that in our society and our culture.
Yeah, and it's a great agricultural story. I mean, people, had to, there was a lot of farming going on, a lot of, seed sowing, to get their food and stuff. So it's very relatable to the people of Jesus' time and even to us.
Right. Even here in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, people understand like gardening or farming, depending on how far out in the suburbs you are. But I was thinking like one of the ways I thought about maybe starting the sermon is talking about, you drive down a given street and you can see the differences between one yard to the next, like how well people take care of their yards.
Yeah.
Because I know there's somebody like a few houses past me that it seems like it is like a golf course, like how well maintained their lawn is, almost like the person might be out there with scissors, make sure everything's nice and even.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I always marvel at people who take care of their gardens and their lawns like that. It's a huge investment of time and energy, and I'm just happy if I can get my lawn cut, right, 1 week over the next, let alone, get it so it's all level.
And then some people seem like you can see the lines just perfectly, like at a baseball field. I don't have that skill.
Well, sometimes I'll go one way one time, and then the next way I'll go another way, and then maybe if I really get fancy, I might go diagonal the third time.
Whoa.
It's just so it kind of looks like I know what I'm doing.
I just do the same way every time. I have my little route that I go, and because I usually set it as an outdoor walk for my phone as like a exercise, so you can look at the map and you just see the circle that I walk around and stuff.
Yeah. So it's a relatable story,
and that's like all the parables are meant to be. That's something we can relate to and understand when Jesus is putting in earthly terms that message about himself and salvation.
Right. Well, let's get at the text. Maybe we should take a look at it. Matthew chapter 13.
So, do you want me to read 1 through 9, and then you can read 18 through 24? Yeah.
Or 23?
Yeah, so let's see here. It wasn't there. Right. So Matthew 13. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced some grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear.
Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30.
So yeah, this is the word of our Lord.
Yeah, thanks be to God.
So yeah, it's a familiar parable, I would say, for many people.
I think so. Yeah, it really comes up appropriately through the time of summer.
Right.
The reading lectionary kind of plunks it in there, and it's a good time because everybody's kind of like in that mode of tending to their gardens and stuff.
Right, and like I mentioned in my message on Sunday or over the weekend, that just because you're one type of soil at this stage of your life doesn't mean you can't change the type of soil that you are, which I think is important for us to remember, that idea of like, oh, it can change. It doesn't always have to be this type of soil. Just like, you look at soils that we might have in our own yards. Depending on the year, farming, you might have a really great crop one year.
Right.
Next year it might not be as good.
Yeah, for sure. There's all sorts of conditions that change, the outcome of it. You think of just like, you'd mentioned grass and lawns. I mean, a couple of years ago, our front lawn had patches all over it, and I don't know if we had grubs underneath or whatever, so I was trying everything to get that figured out and then put some Grub-X on it, and now this year it's looking a whole lot better, so it's the same kind of thought process there.
And that nurturing that it takes. If you're not a good soil, one of those three that they talked about, it takes that nurturing. And then if you are the good soil, you got to continue to nurture. You just don't stop like, oh, I'm good soil, I'm good to go.
Right. And the soil, is the soil, right? I mean, but there's also extraneous factors, like my grass. 1 year it was doing good for a stretch, but this outside factor of these grubs coming in, that kind of got at, the soil. And, they eat away at the roots. And even like, we just got through a drought.
Right.
And like all of our lawns were looking brown and really brittle. And, so the scorching of the heat did something to it.
Or even like dogs, because I know my dog Madison has kind of ruined some of my grass. And I'm just like, why bother replanting it? It's just going to die again.
Yeah.
Anyways, because of her. But so like there's all these different things. And like I kind of was preaching on, there's things we can do to kind of prevent that. And like I was especially thinking of that first group, because I think, they're all vulnerable, but that first group is that one that doesn't even get a chance to know or believe. And so what are we going to do to, in a sense, protect that person so that they can actually let that root grow a hold and grow in them so they can come to that belief and knowledge of Jesus as their Savior?
Yeah, you said it right there. I mean, like, it's that newbie. And usually people new to the faith are wide open. Their hearts are wide open, and they're ready to just soak it in and absorb it. And look what the evil one does. Like, he doesn't even allow it to take root. He snatches it away from the heart. So, I mean, that shows how he's paying attention to new ones to the faith. So yeah, that word, he snatches it away, is what he's after.
And when you're kind of talking about the newbie there and that like new to the faith, they're wide open and ready to hear, it almost reminds me of that second one where like the tribulations or they get scorched and like they leave. That's like the people that have those mountaintop experiences when it comes to their faith. And
Yes.
sometimes that is like a new person to the faith. I think of like the National Youth Gathering, which our youth went on last year, or some experience like that where you're like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm pumped and I can't wait and I just want to keep growing. But then when that tribulation happens, they're like, whoa, this isn't what I signed up for.
Right.
And I think that was an important kind of distinction too I picked up listening to Chad Bird was that tribulation isn't just like, oh, I had this bad thing go on in my life. This is that persecution.
Yeah.
No, I think it's that next one, the third, with the thorns and the getting choked out with the weeds. That's more like I had maybe a rust spot in my life or the things of this world are choking out my faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a progression, kind of like what Jesus is saying and what we're talking about. Like, the first one, anyone who hears the kingdom and does not understand it. So they don't have a really good understanding. The evil one doesn't even want you to even understand.
Right. He wants to keep us in that unbelief.
Yeah, keep you in the dark, kind of thing. And then, okay, if you made it that far, now you're really just, taking everything in. You have joy over receiving the gospel, but yet you haven't had time to produce roots. And then, so up comes all the troubles of the world, and we're going to,
snuff it out.
Snuff it out. Yeah, it's like, here's the game plan.
Like, oh, I see you're starting to grow. And I think it was when you, Jenny, and I were talking earlier today about like gardening a little bit. And Jenny was talking about their garden that her and her husband Tim planted. And that was it the radishes? Didn't have enough space to grow. And they're not going to really, or when they did some of the weeding, it pulled out them because they were too close. The weeds grew too close.
Right. Yeah. So the actual thing that you were wanting to grow and produce a harvest got uprooted as you tried to pull those weeds up that were very close. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that from the little bit of gardening skills I know is like, especially certain things, you need a lot of space for that to grow because it's a bigger thing. And if it doesn't have that room to grow, it's not going to be fruitful.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We in our backyard, I got this thing I got to take care of. It's I always get the lily. No.
Lily of the valley?
No. Morning glory. Oh. Morning glory is like a viney thing with a flower. The flowers all look beautiful and everything, but morning glory usually tangles itself up in a chain link fence. Well, we got a little morning glory in our back fence. And it's working its way out into my lawn. And it's like, you just see it like tangling up all in the lawn. And anything along the way, it just finds its way to choke out. And so that's what I think of like, this whole like choking out thing is like morning glory. And it's a Dickens to get rid of, know.
It's like a creeping myrtle.
Something like creeping Lena or whatever, creeping myrtle.
Yeah, look at us with our green thumbs here. Right. That's when people want to talk to somebody with green thumbs, they come to us.
They come to us, yeah. So I'm out, cutting the grass the other day, and I'm like, oh, all this morning glory. I gotta, get some more fertilizer down to kill this stuff. Right. But it's kind of a pesty thing, so. Yeah, so, that's what persecution and tribulation does. We don't have enough roots to sustain it. And so, people immediately fall away.
Right, and that's like the whole idea of like what we've been talking about, the one in the journey of following Jesus, is we don't want people to fall away. We want to be there to nurture those seeds that have been planted, whether we're the person who planted that seed or somebody else in the previous part of that person's life planted that seed. We come alongside to water and nurture that and however we can, and like depends on what type of soil they're at is. And just like when we talked about that journey of following Jesus, there was different stages, and how you kind of help that person is different depending on where they're at in their journey.
Correct. Yeah, so you don't want to let them get to that off ramp that journey with Jesus talked about, and you want to kind of come alongside them and help them to grow. And so there's always that's discipling, like looking back behind you to someone who's kind of still growing. Not that you're at a higher level, but maybe you've been in the faith more, you're a little bit more mature. it's bringing them along, you know.
Right. You can share about your experiences and even show that person, listen, I don't always have it all together, but here's where I've seen God help me so that I can grow. And, that's the other important, as we look to see how we can nurture and disciple somebody else, we still need to take care of ourselves as well in that nurturing. We can't, say like when we're nurturing, we're considered the good soil being fruitful, but we also have to then continue to make sure we maintain being that good soil and not fall into those traps.
Right. For sure. And so then the next one is, the thorns, among the thorns, kind of where you were going with Jenny's thing with the radishes. This is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke out the word and proves unfruitful. So it's kind of like, I think what he means by, the cares of the world. So is that like the troubles of the world, but also what seems good?
Right, just our life, like work, family, friends, activities. And not, like I said, none of those are bad things in of themselves. Like God gave us our families as a gift, and same with friends and the activities we enjoy.
Yeah.
But when that becomes that number one priority, it begins to choke out our faith because we're like, I'm so focused on this. If you're so busy and focused on your job, well, I got to get to work. I got to do all this. Oh, I don't have time to do my devotions today. So I'm going to forego that, thus kind of choking that out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all based upon like everyone's hearing the word. That's the seed coming into us. And it's like, how do we protect that seed and allow it to grow and to give it like opportunity not to be choked out in this world by the good things of life and things of that nature. It's like really trying to, as you were getting at, what is the priority in our life? Is it our relationship with God or just enjoying everything? And that's us in our world today. People love to enjoy things, and as you said, they're all wonderful things. We love to enjoy our family, time with our family, and that's important. But at the risk of not spending time with God, that's when things can choke us out.
Right, and it could depend on the given day. Like some days we can be spot on, like got our priorities in check, and God, boom, He's number one. But then other days it might slip, and we might not even realize that we're letting it get choked out. And I think it's that subtlety of that getting choked out. I think even like when you think about the weeds growing in, you can see the weeds like, oh, it's just a little bit of weeds. It's not that bad.
Yep.
And then next thing you know,
boom.
It is boom, as you said, and it's overtaken everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I've we've done some extra gardening with flowers and beds this year, and so sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, there's a couple of weeds popping up here and there, and so you let them go a day or two, and also like, wow, where did all this come from? And like, it's not only weeds, but it's like crabgrass, and I don't know. There's some weeds, that go long rooted, that they have long stalks. If you get down there, you won't get like bit by the thorns. Pull those out, and there's nothing more satisfying than like, oh yeah,
when you get a nice clean pull of that root.
Yes, and you're like, ha, gotcha.
But then you get the times when you barely get any of the root, and you just get more of the plant itself. It's
those ones close to the ground, I call them broadleaf weeds, and you try and get your hand around the whole thing, and you pick it up, and it just all snaps off, and you see all the tops right at the ground level. You're like, all right, I gotta dig that out.
Right, because like the spots I get it in weeds, and like I weeded probably last month. I think in the there's along my drive there's a little patch where my grandma used to grow tomatoes, and I don't do tomatoes, and so like weeds will grow there, and usually I'll spray like more of a stronger weed killer there because Madison doesn't go by that area ever. And then like the last week or so, I'm like, man, it is really sprouting in those weeds. And I thought, spraying the weed begone Roundup should take that right out.
Yeah.
But what makes that hard, there's a little bit of there's a brick dividing where like the mulch and the dirt is and the driveway. And sometimes the weeds grow up through the holes in the bricks, which then that makes it difficult because you can't really necessarily get a good grip. And if you don't get it all the way out, you can't really dig inside the hole of the brick.
It's like stinking weeds. Like they'll find the closest piece of brick or cement to get so close to that you can't even get in there to get at it.
Right.
And then sometimes, I don't know if you've noticed, like some weeds, you'll see it over here. And if you just grab it where it's at, well, you're not anywhere near where it's into the ground, because underneath it'll snake around and it'll be over there. And so you're like, oh yeah, I got to find, where it is at the ground and then pull it up, because it's just like, ha ha ha, you go ahead, you try and pull me up where you see me. I'm going to be back,
Right. It feels like I had one, like in that same area I was talking about, that like it felt like the root was going underneath like the concrete steps. I'm like, I can't. And it's like right up against it. I'm like, I can't really get a shovel in there, because I'm either don't have enough room to get an angle to dig it out against the brick or the concrete.
Yep.
And if I'm going from the other way, I'm like, I don't have enough to get underneath, because I'm kicking up against there, and I pull, I'm like, this is just... thanks a lot, Adam and Eve, eating that piece of fruit in the garden, and now we have the weeds in our life. But isn't that the thing with like the weeds and the things of this life? It just kind of winds, and we don't even know how we even got kind of in that starting spot. We're like, how did I get so far removed where God got so pushed down in my priority list?
Yeah, right. And it grows so fast. The weeds in our life grow so fast. We get all tangled up in them. And so that's where we got to be always tending the soil of our heart. And so that leads to the last one, seed sown on good soil. They hear the word and they understand it. So kind of like an opposite effect of how this started. Jesus started out the one who hears the word of the kingdom and doesn't understand it. And then some different levels, like Satan doesn't want us to understand it, where we find like, oh, this is a good thing. Or then we get choked out by the worldly stuff, and like, okay, now you understand it. Now it's going to bear fruit. And, he gives three measurements, right? And you have fruit that yields 100, 60, or 30. And and then he says, hey, he who has ears, let him hear. He wants us to hear the word of God.
Right.
And
and like we talked about in the Isaiah 55 passage, he doesn't send his word out without any return. There's always that return. And I think that's important, because some people are like, it brings up an interesting discussion, which I didn't even talk about this weekend. Are we sowing our seed recklessly when we're just throwing it wherever? Because that's what some people think sometimes, like, it almost sounds reckless if you're just going to throw the seed wherever.
Right.
But, God's word tells us that we should sow wherever. It's not up to us to find that good soil, because could you imagine if, like, our forefathers or people that build up where we live in the subdivision that we live in are like, well, is this the right soil to build a house?
Right.
They're like, nope, we're building here. They weren't like, oh, is this going to be the right area? Or like, I know like my mom will talk about this, like, you look at like Crystal Lake, if you're on Northwest Highway going into Crystal Lake, like Target and through the Best Buy and all the way down to like where you can turn back to get into that central back there, high school there. Where like my mom's like, I remember as a kid being able to play on like across Route 14, Northwest Highway. And nowadays, you wouldn't think twice about it. And that just shows you how quickly that builds up. Like, it wasn't like the people like, oh, this would be a good area. It's just like, oh, this is where people are going, so let's build up this area.
Right.
And look how booming now that Route 14 is.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it is amazing. I was just trying to look up the Greek on the he who has ears, let him hear, and to see if it was meaning to understand. And it is really just about hearing. Oh, yeah, to comprehend, to understand. So he who has ears, let him hear. So we're just not hearing, and that's why I was like, because twice Jesus uses that doesn't understand, does understand, and then when he says he who has ears, let him hear, is he saying, let him understand?
Right, and I think that is, and like you said, that is that important part of that understanding, because then as we understand the seed and what's been planted inside of us, we know what we need to do so that we can be fruitful and share that into that 100-fold, 60-fold, 30-fold.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so that's that thing. And then next week, we're going to get into the parable of the weeds explained. And so this is kind of a different take. So a lot of times this is called the parable of the wheat and the tares. And again, I am not an agricultural person. I'm not a farmer, although my family ancestry was in farming. But my understanding is like the tares, in Jesus' time, there was like the wheat and the tares look similar. And I think I've looked up pictures of that. And like, so when he gets into talking about like, don't pull up the weeds because you might pull up the wheat. So don't just go and try and separate the weeds or the tares out of the field because you might mistakenly pull up some good wheat in the process. So he's like, wait till the end of the harvest. Let the good and the evil kind of be together. But the angels are going to come and they're going to, do the harvest, and they're going to be the ones who will separate, evil from the good. So
right, and I just pulled up that picture, like, and it does look pretty similar. And like I said, we're not agricultural people here, you and I, and to me, to my untrained eye, I'm like, okay, and like I kind of said in my message, I don't know, like everything is a weed to me unless it's crap.
Right. Yeah. So here the field is the world. And the good seeds are the sons of the kingdom. So again, Jesus kind of helps us out here, and the weeds are the sons of the evil one. So it's a different take on weeds. And when we Americans see word weeds, we're thinking, oh, he's talking about like what we've been talking about. Right. But here it is a weed, but it is something that must grow right alongside the wheat. So we live in a world where there is good and evil, and so the enemy is among us, and it's hard sometimes to differentiate on human sight. We don't know what's in someone's heart.
Right, and like it's kind of that hidden and revealed church, where the hidden is what's in a person's heart, the revealed is what we see and worship week to week, is the revealed church. And even like somebody could be singing in a church pew, and then they don't really believe. They're just like, oh, this looks good. I'm just going through the motions.
Yeah. Well, certainly could be that for sure. And so it's Jesus says, hey, just wait till the final harvest, and then there will be that separation. So it's kind of a look toward, when he comes again in power and might and glory, and that which is unproductive and evil will be burned in the fire, and then there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's that whole. Anytime you hear that phrase or read it, it's a reference to eternal hell. So.
Right, and thankfully we're not the one to judge if it's wheat or the tare. That God is the one who judges. God knows what's in a person's heart.
Yeah,
because I would not want that job.
Right, exactly. So hopefully, we can just keep spreading good seeds, and I don't know. There's no transforming talk about like, oh, can the tare or the weed turn into a wheat? Obviously, that doesn't happen in agriculture. And the way Jesus is kind of saying, he's saying, identify your enemy, and guess what? Your enemy is so crafty. He kind of tries to make it look like one of us. So just be wary of that.
Right, and like. That's where studying God's word comes in handy, because then we can see the difference or know what to look for when the devil tricking us. I think I've talked about this either on a podcast or a gathering place, but like how they train somebody to spot counterfeit money. They give them like the real like $100 bill to study that, so they know every little intricate detail about that. So then when they see the fake, they're like, oh, this is where it's not like the real bill.
Yeah.
And I think the same comes for like faith and like learning about God. Like, the more we study God, the more in depth we go, the easier we're like, oh, wait, that's not quite right. Or the devil twisted that a little bit, so I'm not going to fall for it this time.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's a
good preview. We don't want to, like, blow the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder for the wonderful sermon you're going to have this weekend.
I know. It will be glorious because the Lord will deliver it to me.
Right.
I'm just waiting to pick it up at the portal.
Waiting for the divine inspiration.
Kind of like when I go to Little Caesars, I order a pizza and they give me a number, a combination. It opens up the beautiful portal and I pull out my pizza. I need to have the Lord fill up my portal.
There you go.
And give me the combination.
Never thought I'd hear that analogy used, but it's a great analogy. And
can you tell I haven't had lunch yet? I'm just a little hungry.
So we're gonna wrap it up there, so you can go and grab lunch.
Go grab my Little Caesars,
and I can get going on where I need to get going to now for the afternoon. And thank you everybody for tuning in and listening and watching, maybe. And God's blessings.
Have a great day.